Hello, my name is Timothy Curls, and today I'd like to talk with you about America. America is a land of rebels, a place where men and women refused to submit to tyranny and instead fought for liberty and individualism. This tradition of American individualism flourished in the American Northeast in the early days of America. The American Northeast has always been a bastion of the revolutionary ideals of liberty and individualism. In some ways, it still is. I will demonstrate this spirit of liberty and individualism by examining the life and works of Thomas Paine, Henry David Thoreau, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, respectively. Then I will examine how the early culture of the Northeast compares with the culture there today.
First, let's examine the life and works of one of the founding fathers of the United States, Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was born on February 9, 1737, and he died on June 8, 1809. Paine was a political theorist and activist. He was a philosopher, and he was an American revolutionary. He penned some of the most important documents of the American Revolution, including Common Sense, The American Crisis, Rights of Man, and The Age of Reason. Paine was a paragon of the virtues of liberty and individualism. In a time when religion dominated society, he argued for reason and free thought, and against organized religion. In Common Sense, he makes a strong case for Americans to seek their independence from Great Britain. Thomas Paine argued that America no longer needed Great Britain, and that it could stand on its own. He said that the colonists would be much happier in a system where they were represented, and where they could make their own laws, and that American independence would give them more respect from the other countries in the world. Such ideas like this were very dangerous at the time and could have easily led to his execution, but he wasn't discouraged. He fought for the liberty that he believed in. In Common Sense, he writes, "O ye that love mankind, ye that dare oppose not only the tyranny but the tyrant, stand forth. Every spot of the old world is overrun with oppression. Freedom has been hunted round the globe. Asia and Africa have long expelled her. Europe regards her like a stranger, and England hath given her warning to depart. O receive the fugitive, and prepare in time an asylum for mankind." Not everybody agreed with how the American government was set up. One of the most popular and outspoken critics of the government was Henry David Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau was born on July 12, 1817, and died May 6, 1862. He went to Harvard and lived most of his life in Massachusetts. He was a polymath with a wide range of interests. He was an essayist, a poet, a philosopher, a naturalist, a surveyor, a yogi, and a historian. His two most famous works were the book Walden and his essay Civil Disobedience. Thoreau was a proponent of simple living, which went against the grain for his time. He said, "Most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only indispensable, but positively hindrances to the elevation of mankind." This wasn't the only way he went against the grain. In Civil Disobedience, Thoreau criticizes the rule of the majority, saying that the majority will use their power to oppress the minority. He's also very critical of trying to change the government slowly over time and doesn't think it will work. Henry David Thoreau was a fierce individualist who fought for liberty and justice his whole life. He wrote, "There will never be a really free and enlightened state until the state comes to recognize the individual as a higher and independent power, from which all its own power and authority are derived." He also wrote, "I was not born to be forced. I will breathe after my own fashion. Let us see who is the strongest." In Civil Disobedience, he also comes out strongly against slavery and paying taxes. And in 1846, he was jailed for not paying his taxes, but that never stopped him from standing up for what he believed in. As mentioned previously, America has a rich tradition of individualism. One of the most famous and profound proponents of individualism is the Northeast philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson was born on May 25, 1803, and died on April 27, 1882. Like Thoreau, he lived in Massachusetts for most of his life. He was an essayist, a lecturer, a philosopher, and a poet. Like Paine, he was against organized religion and believed people should come to their own conclusions instead of being told what to believe. Like Thoreau, he was strongly against slavery and was a big believer in being connected with nature. His most notable works include Self-Reliance, Nature, The American Scholar, and The Poet. In Self-Reliance, Emerson shows his strong support of individualism by arguing that instead of conforming to societal expectations, people should follow their own will and focus on developing their own culture to progress as individuals. He prioritizes individual growth even over societal progress. Emerson writes, "Be yourself, no base imitator of another, but your best self. There is something which you can do better than another. Listen to that inward voice and bravely obey that. Do the things at which you are great, not what you were never made for." From this quote, we can see Emerson's firm conviction towards individualism and liberty from the dictates of society. Now that we've seen the culture of the Northeast in the 17 and 1800s, how does it compare to the culture there today? Is the culture of the American Northeast the same as it was? In some ways, yes. In other ways, not so much. The northeastern states have some of the best laws for protecting gay, bisexual, and transgendered individuals and their rights. This shows at least some support for liberty and standing up for the rights of individuals. However, many of the colleges and universities in the Northeast have some of the most strongest censorship rules in the entire United States, which is really disturbing and flies in the face of individualism. They also have very strong gun laws in the Northeast that I feel are unnecessarily strict and goes against the liberty of the individual.
The American Northeast was, and in many ways still is, a hotbed of the American ideals of liberty and individualism. Through the writings of Thomas Paine, Henry David Thoreau, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, we can see how the values of liberty and individualism were able to flourish in the early days of the American Northeast. Looking at the Northeast today, we can see how, in many ways, they are still connected to their roots. The Northeast needs to continue to allow individualism to flourish. The development of the individual should be paramount.